Hello, everybody who's already joined the line. We will be starting shortly, so just give us a few minutes. We are waiting for more people to join on the line, and then we will get started. All right. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining. We are excited today for the webinar. We have with us two special guests. We have with us Meighan Brodkey and Guillermo Pedroni. My name is Daniela, and I will be your moderator for today's presentation. Before we get started, I would like to address some housekeeping issues. We have a packed audience, so of course, all lines are going to be muted for optimal sound quality. We will be including a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Please feel free to submit any questions in the Q&A box that you guys have, and we'll get back to you at the end of the webinar for whatever time we have left. And if we don't reach your question, then we will respond via email. Please note that the session is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you guys in a follow-up email. We'll also be running a couple of short poll questions during the webinar. You can answer simply by selecting the relevant answer. And now, before I pass it over to our experts, I'm going to run the first poll question. So the question is, what is your biggest challenge when trying to maintain healthy architecture? You have a few options here. Go ahead and click whatever most applies to you. We don't have every option, of course, but whatever of these options is one of your biggest challenges. And as soon as we're done voting, I will share it with the audience so you guys can kind of get a feel for what the challenges of everybody else and all your peers on the line are facing as well. I'll give it a couple more seconds. We have a few more polls coming in. All right. Okay, so on the screen here are the results. Looks like it's a pretty even spread across everything. So it goes to show you that everybody kind of faces their own challenges. And luckily today we'll be covering a lot of these. Great. Okay, thanks for that, everyone. So now I would like to hand over the reins to Guillermo. Guillermo is a business architect and MVP, and we're very happy to have him on the line today. Guillermo, thank you so much for joining us. I will go ahead and stop my share, and I will hand the reins over to you.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. I'll mess this up real quick. There we go.
Perfect.
All right, so welcome everybody. Happy Today Day. I think it's formally called Tuesday. Yeah, so my name is Guillermo Pedroni. I'm on Twitter here at Guillermo Pedroni. I work at Parisa. We're a small consulting firm. Been in the Salesforce ecosystem for the last 13, 14 years. So I'm going to cover some really high-level concepts here. First, I'm going to cover know your history. What about historical data is necessary? So when you're, whether you're doing a migration, org-to-org migration, managing an integration, pulling data out of legacy systems, maybe it's your ERP, maybe it's another system like a PLM or something like that. Whatever it is, you really need to understand a few basic concepts before you can do quote unquote the right thing. Whether you need to just back it up, migrate it, whatever it is, there's always a short, mid, and a long-term strategy. And if you're only thinking about one or the other, then you're not really thinking holistically about your short, mid, and long-term goals. So typically the kind of questions you want to ask in a data migration, regardless of what the migration is about, is do you have compliancy or contractual concerns? On the support side, ultimately, are there reasons that you need warranty information? Are there reasons that you need to know, how far back a customer goes, what products have been purchased or sold or rented or leased or whatever the scenarios might be? On the sales side, do you need all 500 years of sales data? Do you just need the last 3 years, the last 2 years? From the financial perspective, the questions typically ending up are, when do contracts start? What do the contracts specify? And you typically don't need all finance details, but just the kind of the key attributes. And on the legal side are there some legal and liability concerns that you must have specific information in your data sets that go back for X periods of time. So once you understand kind of like those high-level departmental scenario-based critical concepts, then that starts to paint the picture of, what specific information and how far back should I go. So again, some people need a year's worth of data, some need 2, some need 3. But kind of the bigger question is not so much the broad period of data information that you're looking to capture and absorb, but the reality is it might be, the picture might be different for different data sets. Maybe support needs 3 years, maybe sales needs 6 years, maybe the legal team needs 10 years. Do I need all task information? Do I need just the most relevant information, the most actionable information? So all these are types of questions that you should be asking as far as historical data capturing and transitioning of that information. And the other key questions are how often should I be pulling data, or how far back? What is the volume? Just remember that there are some costs and cost concerns when bringing over all data information, and you might end up wanting to keep some of the just the bare bone minimum, whatever you're legally obligated to bring over, and then everything else can remain through some fancy integrations that we talk about later. And then also remember, as you pull data out of your old systems or legacy systems, you do have to consider, what if I have to go back in time, or maybe the rules and regulations have changed and now I need to oblige by more information. So ensuring that you have not only the right cycle, the right amounts, but also do you have the keys to go back in time, unique keys or record key or key locators, whatever you want to call them, essentially, so you can go back and pull more information. Because maybe, during an initial migration, you only need a partial data set, and then, 6 years or 6 months later, you realize I actually need a little bit more detail from the same record information or more volume information. So that's just a little about data. A little bit about sandboxes. They are definitely more than just a playground, more than just a place for you to build new concepts. So everybody knows that a sandbox essentially is there to play and gather and build new designs and test things out, right? But a really cool thing that I like to do, and several other architects and admins like to do, is I use them as quarterly backups, metadata backups. So not the data themselves, because you can only buy so many full sandboxes and so many partial sandboxes, but a developer sandbox, since you typically get 25 developer sandbox, you probably have at least 20, maybe 10 if you're really aggressive, sandboxes just sitting there. So a really good idea is to just maybe on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis is what I prefer, or even on a yearly basis, you can take a stamp in time. And typically at the first of a quarter, I'll pause what I'm doing after my coffee break and coffee talk. I'll actually go into the system, and this happens with all my clients, not just 1 or 2, but basically a practice that I implement on all clients. And we just literally have 4 backups, because typically release schedules we do monthly, but it's not typically to do the same changes in the same objects for us, at least. So we like to take a snapshot in time, and depending on how fast we're going, we'll title it year, quarter, and sometimes month, depending on what the use case is. And then we'll just put a description that this in the sandbox description, saying that this backup is purely for a stamp in time and not to be used for development. Just make sure that you're keeping email deliverability on some of those older sandboxes. Since there's no data, you're not actually going to have any scheduled jobs kick off and fire generally, unless you're doing something fancy in there. So that's a really good trick that we really like to do. Also, if you ever like me and you're told, hurry up, get it done, and then wait, because that never happens in the real world, right? But essentially what you could do, instead of backing it up on the app exchange or something like that, you could spin up a new sandbox on its own, call it RMA project, call it CPQ project, or whatever you might have, whatever the project name is. You can actually deploy, package deploy, and implement said solution into a sandbox, specifying the sandbox that its intention is only for a particular project, specify what the project is, any BRDs or any project names, whatever, depending on what systems you're using, like Jira or Trello or something like that. Um, and then essentially just have it deployed. Another kind of cool little trick you can do is you can then, right after you deploy it, implement it, essentially package it up, get an outbound package ready to go, and then you're off to the races from there. Integration users are a really fun trick. If you've got the budget, third-party integrations are really cool to set up their own individual license. Kind of the benefits here are you can design a dedicated user that so you know exactly who touched it, when was the last touch, and what system actually modified said record. Because they do cost money, this might not be a trick that everybody can use, but it is something that is highly usable, especially for like marketing automation systems, ERP integrations, and things like that. Because you want to know, was it an actual human or was it a system that modified your data? Remember, be cautious of if you're giving it full admin access versus limited admin access. Most of the time, you want to give it limited or almost unlimited access. This is ideal basically for fine-tuning and controlling what objects, what tables, what records it can have. Sometimes you might want to, like in the marketing automation world, there are reasons that you want to not give it, access to the entire database because you want to suppress specific types of contacts or specific types of leads. On the ERP side, sometimes you don't want it to access your prospect information, and you only want the ERP to actually see customers that have closed-won deals versus, every single partner and things like that might not exist. Remember, full admin access is basically ideal if you have 100% trust in the system. Tools like Okta, where they provision users, profiles, and permission sets are ideal for full admin access, but other systems like maybe a marketing automation is not ideal for admin access. And then again, consider how you manage these account passwords. You either manually reset them, but you can break the integrations. I've seen more fancy integrations where you basically set up a password resetting database that are tied to these, and as you reset the database, it proliferates throughout your actual integration, keeping you in a seamless, secure environment. Also, be cautious. Sometimes you definitely want to implement backdoors. Consider global validation rules that bypass methods for API users. Sometimes the ERP just doesn't know information, but it still has to get its job done. So putting a bypass running API user profile, whatever you do, is also a pretty neat trick. Time to integrate, right? So when you get to integrations, what's on the menu? So there's three variations of how you want to integrate here. You can use outbound messages. The benefit here is you can, these are configurable, and admin can write them using a workflow and an outbound message function. You can move data from one system in a single direction back out to another system. That may include transforming a little bit of information, but they're not highly complex. The benefit here is there's no diff required usually. ETL tools, these are probably the most fancy, most luxurious integration choices that you have. So you do want to be mindful that there could be a cost factor here. Typically, they can be plug and play. They can be partial configuration solutions, but they can also be highly complex if you have a developer on staff or know a little bit of code writing skills. You can move data systems from one system to another, including transformation. But you do have to be mindful of API, 24-hour API limitations that does adjust as you add new users, so just be careful of that. And then on the custom integration API side, you have highly scalable but long-term dependencies on more advanced complex integrations. It does require a developer to be on staff. You do have unlimited integration possibilities depending on your developer skill set. And then you also have to be mindful that there are some API limits that you do have to consciously pay attention to. Declarative automations. So declarative versus non-declarative automation, what should I use? What are the benefits and things like that? We could probably spend just, 2 hours on this conversation or years on this conversation. So I'm just going to glance at it lightly. Workflows are really great for quick and easy automation, simple audit management. It runs on create and edit. Generally, it is bulkified. You can't really break a workflow. The problem here is they don't execute complex tasks such as updating parent objects through a standard lookup or unrelated objects. There are 5, depending on what you request from Salesforce, 50 to 300 workflows per object, but there is a 2,000 limit org. And then once you start hitting the 2,000 scenario, basically your system can start to slow down depending on what's happening. They also only have a single decision-making process, so for more advanced workflow, you do have to write more of them. So when workflow doesn't actually work out, Process Builder is actually an amazing application. The cool thing is here, they're complex. They update basically any record that's related. They do run on edit, create, and they are actually invocable and repeatable. The problem is here you can't actually audit them very easily. They are actually very slow. It isn't exactly bulkified. It's kind of bulkified, but not really. And then you can reference unrelated. You can't reference unrelated objects, but you can update related objects themselves. The limit here is similar to Apex, not exactly. And the numbers must be defaulted. Otherwise, you get a null point error. You can't actually do outbound messages, but you can piggyback off of code to do that. And then there's some other limitations. Flow is actually an amazing application. It can handle more complex automation and branching scenarios. You can actually collect data and present a UI on demand. Problem here is auditing, again, isn't very easy. It is a little slower, and it isn't also exactly bulkified. And basically, Flow is just a different version of Process Builder, more raw version, if you like to call it that. And then from there, we do have triggers, which are extremely complex. You can pretty much, the sky's the limit. You can update any record, whether it's related or non-related to that record that initiated it. And it basically does anything you can imagine as long as you have a good developer on staff. Auditing isn't easy. You actually have to be a developer and know how to read code. But you can't run unlimited resources, and it technically is breakable just like Flow and Process Builder. You can break it by making administration changes, and so you do have to do regression testing and check your work there. So really quickly, code, right? So many of you may not actually be developers. Maybe you are. You do have to be mindful that you have 101 SOQL error queries for synchronous and then 200 for asynchronous. You also have to be mindful that it only picks up 50,000 records per actual query, so you just have to do some basic calculations there. General reminder synchronous runs in real time, so triggers before insert, after update, before delete, after undelete. These are scenarios that you can use. This is really good for immediate instant automation and collecting and doing the job that you need done. Asynchronous is really good for future calls, batch jobs. Basically, I need it eventually, but I don't need it right now. So it's great for presenting, gathering information, an hour later or minutes later after something happens, and eventually somebody will look at it. A really cool trick here, not a dev class, but what I typically tell a lot of developers is if we could move a lot of the configuration to custom metadata types, this would actually allow you to potentially make some code, not all code, configurable and deployable faster. So let's say you have an interface and you need to make some changes to your code. You don't have to regression test and do all that fun stuff if you've injected some custom metadata type for having configuration or power user configuration. Meighan, off to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Guillermo. That was fabulous. I'm going to share my screen here. And hi, everybody. I am Meighan Brodkey. I am the manager of the architecture team at Exceed Consulting, as well as a Salesforce MVP. And you can catch me on Twitter, Meighan SF. I'm always down to chat, so feel free to follow me. So one of the first things I want to talk to you about is making sure you're properly planning. First off, you got to start right with your foundation, get the right licenses. We all know the end of the quarter means we could get some sweet deals on licenses. Just because the license is cheaper and it's being available to us at the end of the quarter doesn't mean it is the right license for you. Check to see, do you need a full standard license for your users, or can you go with platform licenses? If you're building a community, check to see if you're getting customer community. Does that cover everything you want in your community? Or should you actually be getting customer community plus or partner? Also check out the vertical clouds. If you're working in the financial industry, financial services cloud might be a great option for you. Then going from there, make sure you're only showing your users what they need to see. Nobody should have access to something that they don't need. Not only does it decrease usability, but it makes your org less secure. And that foundation again, your org-wide defaults. If you've ever seen the security triangle for Salesforce, you know that your org-wide defaults are down at the bottom because they are the foundation of all security. Setting up what is private, what is public read-only, what is public read-write, that is going to set you up for your basic success on your path forward. One of the other things you need to know is also know when are you over your head? Sometimes projects are bigger than what you expected. Sometimes when you're scoping a project, things might be outside of your wheelhouse. And in that situation, you need to know, should I be working with a consultant? Should I be asking for help from a senior admin? Or should I be getting help from a technical architect? There's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know, or asking for help. There's so much to know in the world of Salesforce that nobody can know everything. So just raise your hand, say you need help, and in the long run, not only you will thank yourself for it, but your users and the people that have to work in your org in the future doing configuration will thank you for it as well. And then build to scale. You're not just building for this project. And I know Guillermo mentioned this before, you've got to keep that future picture in mind. But keep in mind your design. Make sure what you are building is sustainable and that it will grow with you. You don't want to build throwaway work. You put in a lot of effort, put in a lot of hard work there, so do the other people. Your users get used to what you're building as well, so it's going to help with usability if you're building something that you can layer onto as you go. Next up, security. Oh my gosh, security is such a confusing part of Salesforce. There's so many different options. And where do you even begin? There are a number of different things to think about with security, starting with, profiles or by default, etc. But then you have your next level of security where you're looking at multi-factor authentication. Do you need two-factor authentication? How should people be logging in? Do they need an activation code to get into your org? These are things to consider to make sure that you're having the right people accessing your org. Run your security health check. This is available inside every Salesforce org. It'll help you find out if your org is secure, where you have areas that may need improvement. But one thing to keep in mind with your security health check is this is being run based on Salesforce's basic standards. You may have internal rules that are different than what Salesforce has for the base rules. And that's totally okay. Your org can vary. Salesforce is customizable. There's a reason for that. It's because you have that flexibility and you have that option to be able to change what is it available to you and how do you want your org configured for your benefit. So run that security health check, but do not take it as the end all be all and the words that you have to follow. Take them as considerations and items to look into and see whether or not they're also something that is a concern for your org. Set your IP login ranges. And for those, do people need to be logging in at certain times? Should this person be able to log in at 2 o'clock in the morning into your org? Some consultants like to log in at 2 o'clock in the morning. So keep that in mind when you are setting up those ranges. And also consider those ranges. Should they also apply to stay in boxes? A lot of times, yes, they should. But for consultants, perhaps they shouldn't. Take time to educate your users about phishing. There's often on the Salesforce Trust website an area about phishing emails that are going out and items that are being sent out. There are information that say it's from Salesforce or from a vendor that's not really from them. Take time to let your users know what they should and shouldn't be clicking on. Decrease your session timeout. Do people need to be allowed to log into Salesforce forever once they log in? Or should they only have 2 hours? Should they only have 4 hours? It's available within your session settings, something worth considering. Password policies. How long should a password be their password? What should be included in a password? Should you have numbers and special characters and capital letters? So definitely something to consider. Make sure that lines up with your internal security rules and that you're not making Salesforce something that gets to bypass rules. You have that flexibility, make sure you set it up. Also enable, and this is my domain, enable my domain. This will help you with Lightning. This will help you going forward, definitely worth doing. Consider Salesforce Shield. If you have platform encryption needs, if you have additional needs, Salesforce Shield is available, but it is not always an option. And then there's the bottom of our My Domain. Next up, don't overdo it. Guillermo mentioned this too. Do not go overboard with your build. Keep it simple so that it remains scalable. If somebody doesn't need a Ferrari, they only need a bicycle, don't be building a Ferrari. Because that Ferrari might not be available tomorrow when what they really needed was a motorcycle for the next step of the build. Think about your MVP versus future. There is no reason to gold plate your first release or every release. When you are doing your build, think about what are the most valuable things for this project? What are the most important items for your users? Rank those, prioritize those, put them together in order and get them ready to go for you in your backlog for this project. In addition, keep in mind those future items. Throw them in the backlog. It just means you don't have to build them this time. By putting together that ranking and that priority, you're going to be able to determine what is now and what is future. Create a design review board. I love the concept of a design review board. You can do this formally or you can do this informally. A design review board allows you to put together your idea for a build. You get all your ideas together. You go and present it to somebody else that you are working with, somebody else. I like to go to my boss. I like to go to someone else on my team. I like to grab somebody else on the project, one of the BAs, and run through. These are the items that I've come up with for how I want to build. Do they line up with the requirements? Am I going a little too far anywhere? Is there anything I missed? And everybody has a different background in Salesforce. We all didn't come from the same place. For example, some people are traditionally chain developers. Some people, like myself, I didn't have a Salesforce background, and then I went customer success manager, admin, architect, with some consultant in between. So by getting those different backgrounds together and beginning those different projects everyone has worked on, you're able to get those opinions in there and find out, hey, maybe this wasn't the right way to go. Maybe what I should have done is not use a process builder, but use a flow. Or maybe this just needs a workflow rule. Or maybe we really should have gone code here and I was setting myself up for failure by trying to do this declaratively. Make sure you get proper requirements. Proper requirements are key. If you don't have good requirements, your build is not going to line up with what the customer wants, or your customer being either a client or the internal users that are going to be using the product. Keep your stories simple. They should all be about the same topic. If you have multiple deployments that can go within one story, maybe it should be broken up into multiple stories. Just because you have a lot of stories doesn't mean you can't get things done. It's all about how much time and estimates go into each one of them. So consider that. And then we work in Agile. So your sprints ensure that you are moving forward, but your sprint grooming lets you adjust those stories. So if you do get requirements in the beginning, and as you get to your next sprint build, we can go through that. As for the tool, if you're talking about the org security tool, you're able to catch that out in setup. I'm going to go back, just type in org monitor or health check, and that should come up inside your setup. And it'll allow you, it runs automatically against your org. And then know your data. Before you mess with data, make sure that you know what is going on with your data. Worst thing that you can ever have happen is to have a customer give you 15 different spreadsheets, all different column labels, and say these are all going into one object. None of these really line up. They want you to manipulate the data for them. That is a high risk on your project. Whoever works with the data should know the data, and that person should be helping you clean it up. You should not be cleaning up data you do not know. And never import data, dirty data. So clean your data and map it into a single spreadsheet before you import it. Instead of importing those 15 different sheets that all have different columns, different headers, clean them up, put them into one. Make sure your data lines up. Make sure you have a VLOOKUP for your pick list values to what the new pick list values are supposed to be. And make it easier on yourself in the long run by creating that single source of truth for your data. Know which columns line up. If you have family, you have product type, and you have a product category, but you only have product family within Salesforce, do those all really line up? Just because one value is the same on the spreadsheet doesn't mean that it really was what was supposed to be product family. Talk to whoever gave you the data. Get to know the data. The data will be your best friend. And know which tools work for you. If you are doing a one-time data import, sure, data loader, Salesforce Inspector, data loader IO, that's great. But if you're doing data connected to another system, in that situation, should you be building custom? Should you be using an ELT tool? Is MuleSoft right? Is Boomi right? What type of tool should you be using? There are plenty of different points to consider there, everything from price range to system that you're connecting to. So make sure you have those proper requirements so that you choose the right ELT tool, or if you don't need one, don't look at getting one. And if you need to go custom, but as we all know, it's clicks before code and build, buy before build with Salesforce. You also have the option to switch off validation rules and automation. There are a couple of different ways you can do this. The internal data import tool allows you to do this, but you have a cap of 50,000 records, which is not very many records when you look at how many records go into your org. So consider looking at a hierarchy custom setting within your validation rules and within your process builders and workflow rules as a way to turn off your validation rules and your automation. Make sure you also have one for your triggers. You can do one for all, either all automation for cases, all validation rules for cases, or you can do one on a per rule basis. That way you can have specific users bypass with the hierarchy custom setting and keep them on for your end users and just take that person that's doing the data import and have them turned off for them. It's a great little workaround for turning off your automation and rules while using what is given to you within Salesforce and not doing anything with crazy custom code. And then next up are profiles and your perm sets. So Salesforce recently came out with the option for you to be able to create perm set groups. These are so cool. They allow you to keep your profiles to a minimum. Your profile should be pretty much your base permissions and whatever is going to be used by everyone across the board that will be assigned that profile. You can use perm sets for one-off access. For example, if I need to be a community manager, there can be a perm set made to give me community management permissions. But, and they're, like I said, they increase your access in that one-off situation. But with the new perm set groups, what you're able to do is, let's say, sales always has these 5 perm sets. You have to assign them whenever they get hired. And marketing has these 4. And accounting, man, they've got 7. Instead of having a spreadsheet that you track this on, what you're able to do is take all these permission sets, drop them into a perm set group, name them after that role, role as in position, not role as in role hierarchy. And then you can just assign them a perm set group. This streamlines your user creation process, and it helps make sure that you're always assigning the right permissions to the right users. And one more time, I'm going to say it, never give more access than what a user needs. If somebody doesn't need to see something, If they don't need to create something, if they don't need to edit something, do not give it to them. Delete, modify all, view all, those should be used oh so sparingly in your org. If you have modify all or view all, you really should be an admin. There are very few situations in which you shouldn't be. And in addition, make sure that you are just doing regular reviews of your permissions and who is assigned permissions to make sure that as people switch from role to role, that they're being rotated out of any additional permissions they no longer need and granted the new permissions that they do need. And then know your options. Know when to go out of the box versus build versus buy versus build code. If you can do it out of the box, there's no reason to be building something crazy to do it. Know your limits. Know the pros and cons of going with out of the box versus apps versus declarative versus code. Just because you can do it in a flow doesn't mean you should. Sometimes you need to use what you have right in front of you due to pricing. Sometimes you need to use what you have right in front of you because it's the best practice. Know what your requirements are for your solution. Do not over-engineer. Just because it's fun and new doesn't make it the best choice. We all love to play with stuff. Don't get me wrong, I love playing with stuff too. But that's what our sandboxes are for and our dev orgs. And being able to talk to others in the community. Trying that out in production and trying that out on a customer build when it isn't the right solution for what they need done is not the right way to go. And also, if you make it too complex, it won't grow with you. One last thing to add is that if you if you're working with flow, if your flows are your choice because they are declarative, but they are too complex for you to manage, you should not be going with flow. And don't get me wrong, I love flow. It's one of my favorite tools. That and Community Cloud, I would say, are my top two. But it's one of those things where if nobody can edit it or nobody can change it or update it when there's a modification to be made, then maybe it wasn't the right choice. Maybe it's not the right choice for that customer if they can't use it. And then Danielle, that's up to you. Back to you.
Thanks, Megan. Thank you guys, both Megan and Guillermo, for sharing your slides today. Everybody, don't run off just yet. I actually have a short 5-minute sneak peek to show you guys how Panaya Foresight can help you with a lot of the challenges that Megan spoke about. Let me put my screen into full screen. Give me a second. All right. So my name is Daniela Levy. I am the product marketing manager here at Panaya. And for those of you guys who are not familiar with us, Panaya, just to do a quick introduction into who Panaya is, we were founded in 2006, and our mission has been to help large enterprise organizations accelerate time to market by introducing application changes both fast and risk-free. We do this through a change release management platform that is currently deployed by more than 2,000 global clients. You can see a partial list here. But we have actually also created a solution specifically for Salesforce. So this is what we call the Panaya Foresight solution, made exclusively for our Salesforce clients, and it's designed to meet the specific challenges of Salesforce. We've tailored Foresight to help you guys understand the impact of every change you make before you begin a project. So this is in order to help you guys ensure a successful release. So you can see here that some select Foresight clients, including Schneider Electric, have successfully integrated the Panaya Foresight solution within their ISV 360. And I'll kind of launch in now into how exactly you can use Foresight. Just to kind of set up the problem, Salesforce offers obviously a lot of value with the ability to make customizations. Megan and Guillermo touched on this earlier today. And unfortunately, sometimes things can start to get a bit messy. Many organizations today are faced with a lot of associated complexity. Megan keeps talking about, and so Guillermo also try to keep things simple. You don't want to make things overly complex. But a lot of people have inherited their orgs from a predecessor, and whether you've been at your current company for a long time or for a short time, The outdated and mysterious customizations and processes left behind can often clutter your org, and now you're responsible for them. So you might not always know what they were made for or what they're used for, but of course, removing old processes and customizations ends up creating its own set of problems. As your company and Salesforce org grow, your system accumulates more dependencies, and every change you make to your org runs the risk of breaking something, which of course adds stress and time to every new deployment. So to visualize these facts, you'll see here, this is a typical enterprise organization's Salesforce instance. And on average, from what we've seen of large enterprises, most of them are composed of around 40,000 components, and usually more than double the amount of interdependencies. So the example that we have here, you may be just changing a single field. In this case, it's the opportunity stage field. Maybe you've discovered an old pick list value that is no longer relevant, want to remove it to reduce the confusion among your sales team. As you can see here, this will have a direct impact on several components. In this example, you see that Apex classes, flows, process builders, these are all directly impacted by this particular potential change. Not to mention, as you can see farther down, the indirect impact. So given this Salesforce ripple effect we just discussed, we often hear from customers that they struggle with maintaining clean architecture and overall CRM agility. So we often get asked, how can I remove outdated processes and components without breaking my org? How can I quickly identify the scope of each change? And how can I minimize risk before going to production? Meighan mentioned, of course, understanding the scope before you go in, and of course, how sometimes it can change or expand unexpectedly. So for many clients that we speak to, the go-to process currently for understanding the impact of a change and to predict errors is quite simply to open as many windows as possible and try to manually figure out where a component is used, which of course is neither time efficient nor reliable in terms of reducing risk. So where does Panaya Foresight come in? Here we can see how, we lost the slide. So basically the Panaya Foresight solution removes the need for tedious detective work. We've seen that the use of Foresight can reduce the typical time and cost of any Salesforce change and almost entirely eliminate the risk of post-go live errors. So when you want to do, so when you want to create a new user story, for example, or remove old processes and outdated parts of your org, you're no longer going in blind when you use Panaya Foresight. We extract your metadata and packages, and we are then able to map out your org. So this here is actually a screenshot of our solution itself. This is what it actually looks like when you choose a field or something specific in your org that you want to understand the impact of. We can map it out, and the result is complete visibility into the exact impact and risk of every change before you go into production. So this, of course, this is before you've even made a change. You can select your component and just see the map, and then you can understand what you'll need to develop, what you'll need to test, what you'll need to work on. Ultimately revealing all of the dependencies of the components you want to change and delete, identifying the exact impact of the change so that you can pinpoint development needs and determine testing plans, and ultimately you can prepare for seamless deployment. With Foresight, you will also be able to run impact analysis in real time, determine available usage and dependencies of the components in your Salesforce org, such as Apex classes, process builders, fields, flows, just to name a few, and instantly understand the ripple effect that will appear as a result of what might originally seem like just a small change. So you can use Foresight for major releases. We've seen a lot of clients use it for org cleanup and also for small daily changes alike. It can even assist you with your transition to Lightning to make sure that you're cleaning up your org before moving in a lot of unnecessary junk into your nice new clean Lightning experience. So ultimately this means that every deployment will be made with confidence because you've addressed the risk before you've even started. So this is some reviews that you can find on AppExchange that talk about some of the use cases that people have done with Panaya Foresight. I do not want to talk your ears off all day because I know that most of you guys here came to listen to our wonderful MVPs, Meighan and Guillermo. But for those of you who do want to hear more about Panaya Foresight and how exactly it can help you maintain healthier architecture in your Salesforce org, I'm launching a poll now. It says if you would like to see a customized demo of Panaya Foresight, go ahead and click yes, please. If not, we understand. You can just click no, thanks. But we hope that we get to see you guys on a personalized call. We can do a data extraction from your own org, and we can run it to see exactly how complex your own org is, and dive into how exactly Panaya Foresight would make things easier on your end. Great. So thank you again to Meighan and Guillermo for joining us today and lending us their experience and their tips. It's always very exciting to have these MVPs on the line sharing their experience with us and their best practices. Meighan and Guillermo, thank you so much. And for everybody else on the line, thank you for taking your time today to join us on the call. I will open it up to any questions. As of right now, I don't see any. If you guys have any questions that were not addressed during the webinar, feel free to email us. I will be sending everybody an email with the webinar recording and the slides, so you can have a look at everything there. And yeah, thank you, Meighan and Guillermo.
Thank you.
All right.
There is the one question that came up while I was doing my presentation that I didn't address about test automation. And the org security tool doesn't go over test automation, but there are some great tools out there. If you want to connect, go over some of those. Some are on the App Exchange, such as Provar. Some of them can be configured by developers, such as Selenium. Lots of options. It all depends on if you are using Lightning. Definitely want to go with the Selenium WebDriver versus Selenium IDE. And then if you are looking to build or if you are looking to buy.
Awesome. Oh, looks like we have another one. Question for Meighan. What do you think about event-driven architecture?
So we are actually using our event-driven architecture on one of my projects right now for some of our Lightning Web components and for some of the work that we have going on. So definitely a great topic. Lots of possibilities that are out there. Anything specific that you are looking for?
Okay. Great. Looks like that's it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and shut off the webinar. Again, thank you, everybody. Keep an eye open for that email that will come out for you guys with the slides and the recorded version, and feel free to respond to that with any additional questions.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.